Welcome to TIG Welding 101. Today, we'll be talking about the basics of TIG welding. First of all, it is very important to clean off the edges of the pieces that you're welding. There's nothing more important in welding than the cleanliness of the initial materials. Here, you can see that the edges are being broken. This reduces the sharp corners and gets rid of burrs, which may contaminate the weld. After the edges have been broken, a piece of sandpaper is used to sand off any surface rust or contamination. You can see that the surface becomes much more shiny after the oxide layer is removed with the sandpaper. This is a piece which I have already cleaned. This is the piece which I will be welding. After you have sanded the pieces which are to be welded, it is important that you clean them with acetone. This is a fast-drying solvent which removes the dust from the sanding operation and then dries very quickly so as to not contaminate the weld. You wet a paper towel with the acetone and then wipe down the surfaces which you just sanded. It is important to clean every edge which you will be welding. This is how you turn on the machine. You flip up the switch and then push the green button to turn on power. It's then important to turn on the argon, which is the gas that we will be using to weld today. You open the tank all the way and then close it approximately a quarter turn. Safety gear is very important while welding. The welder wears welding gloves, which are a thin material to give good dexterity, and a welding helmet, which helps to shield from the very bright light of the welding arc. Next, the filler rod is prepared. This often has rust at the end, so trim off the rust. Next, you will cut the filler rod in half, so it is easier to work with. They come stock 3 feet long, and 18 inches is much simpler to use. We will now place the pieces to be welded together to check the fitment. Next, we will prepare the tungsten, which is what generates the electric arc. You can see that the tungsten was contaminated and needed to be cleaned. Use a grinding wheel and hold the tungsten into it while rotating it constantly to give a nice clean edge. As can be seen, the tungsten should be placed so it extends approximately 3/8 of an inch from the tip of the cup. The welding torch should be held like a pencil and should be tilted back at approximately a 45-degree angle into the direction of travel. It should be held approximately 1/8 of an inch off of the welding table or the welding piece and moved along at a constant speed. The filler rod should be moved in front of the welding torch and pulled along so that the torch pushes the puddle and the welding filler rod is dipped into the front edge of the puddle. I will now demonstrate how to weld this piece together. The torch should be placed near the weld materials and then the foot pedal actuated. Once the arc starts, you will see a small pool start to form of molten metal. You will dip the filler metal into this small pool in order to create what is called a tack weld, which is a very small weld meant to hold something in place. I have now created 2 tack welds, one on either side, to stabilize the material. I'll begin to lay a weld bead stemming from one of the tack welds and continuing towards myself. It is important to leave the weld torch over the weld for a second or two after the weld has been completed in order to keep the argon gas flowing over the weld to insulate the weld from oxygen until the weld cools sufficiently. Additional tack welds should be placed at 90-degree angles around the pipe. The tack welds can then slowly be connected together. It is important to swap sides of the pipe in order to keep the heat consistent around the pipe, as a part with significantly greater heat will contract, and this will cause the weld to become crooked, or it can even crack. You will see that I flip the piece over to weld on opposite sides of it to input consistent heat into each side of the workpiece. We will now skip forward to see the completed weld. As you can see, the piece has a nice, consistent, small weld all the way around the pipe. This will ensure quality and strength in the finished workpiece. Allow the weld to cool sufficiently before touching it near the weld piece without gloves.